Hello, everybody in 8th grade literature. This is our literature video for Wednesday, April 22nd. And you were supposed to read the rest of Daedalus, second part of it from 139 to 144, and take the quiz. So if you haven't done that, then pause this for a minute and read it, or take the quiz, or both if you haven't done that, and then come back. Okay, so when we left off, Daedalus had made a mechanical cow for Queen Pasiphae, who had fallen in love with the cow because, well, Aphrodite was angry with her. Kept falling in love with the bull that King Minos had gotten as a gift. So Pasiphae gives Daedalus a leather bag full of gold to thank him for helping her with her problem, and tells him that he has to keep everything a secret, but it doesn't end up being a secret for very long, because as you know, Pasiphae gives birth to a half man, half bull, which they call the Minotaur, which means Minos's bull. Minos, of course, is embarrassed that this has happened, and to hide his embarrassment, he imprisons Queen Pasiphae and the Minotaur and Daedalus. First, he has Daedalus build a labyrinth, a place, a tangled maze on the palace grounds, a place of thorny hedges and sudden rooms called the labyrinth. There were paths running this way and that, becoming corridors, plunging underground, crossing each other, crossing themselves, each one leading back to the middle so that there was no way out. Okay, so they're trapped in there. He puts Daedalus in there because he doesn't want Daedalus to reveal the secret of the labyrinth, how to get in and out. And the Minotaur grows bigger and more scary every day. For Daedalus, the only comfort that he has is his son Icarus, who lives with him. Icarus didn't have to be there, but he didn't want to be without his father, so he lives there with his father. But he gets tired of the maze after a while. And he asks, why can't they leave? And he gives Daedalus the idea of creating wings for them so they can fly out, which would be about the only way they could leave. So Daedalus studies a gull and creates human wings similar to the gull's wings so that they can fly out of the labyrinth. And as they're leaving, Daedalus, or Icarus, of course, is all excited about being able to fly, but Daedalus warns him not to fly too close to the sea because the wings will get wet, and not to fly too close to the sun because, well, that could be bad. Stay in the middle way is the advice. Okay, and he attaches the wings to himself and to Icarus with wax. And they fly off, and Icarus is excited about being able to fly. And I think Daedalus is enjoying it too. People on the ground happen to see them flying over, and they think it's Hermes or Poseidon, as it says here, and they pray to those gods. Icarus had never been so happy. Goes from being on the island stuck in the labyrinth to being out in the wide, bright sky. So he flies too low, and his father warns him, and after a while, Daedalus gets used to the rhythm, but he's getting kind of tired, so he decides to just nod off for a minute. And while he does, as he does, Icarus sees a swan, I think? Yeah, a big white swan flying towards the sun, decides to follow it. He wants to see what the sun really is, because there's several ideas of, what the sun actually is. So he flies up and up and up, and as he goes higher, the air seems thinner, his body seems heavier, the sun seems swollen now it's so close. Hadn't thought of the fact. Remember, it's wax that's holding the wings on, and the wax starts to melt. He thinks he's sweating from the exertion. And of course, when the wax gives way, the wings fall off, and because of that, Icarus plunges into the sea, and Daedalus awakens from his nap just in time to see him fall into the sea and disappear. So We're looking at reading the first part of Theseus for tomorrow, or Thursday, pages 145 to 155. We're dividing this one into 3 parts. So take a look at that. Read the first part of Theseus and take the quiz before you watch the video tomorrow. So, okay, and continuing with the next section of the Adventures of Ulysses. Yesterday, you remember, they passed the Sirens of Titan, and they've been warned that there's a couple of monsters coming up next, and this section is called Scylla and Charybdis. Ulysses had been told in Tartarus of these 2 monsters that guard the narrow waterway leading to Thrinacia. Each of them hid beneath its own huge rock, which stood side by side and were separated only by the width of the strait at its narrowest point. Charybdis dwelt in a cave beneath the left-handed rock. Once she had been a superbly beautiful naiad and a daughter of Poseidon, very loyal to her father in his endless feud with Zeus, the lord of the earth and sky. She it was who rode the hungry tides after Poseidon had stirred up a storm and led them onto the beaches, gobbling up whole villages, submerging fields, drowning forests, claiming them for the sea. She won so much land for her father's kingdom that Zeus became enraged and changed her into a monster, a huge bladder of a creature whose face was all mouth and whose arms and legs were flippers. And Zeus penned her in a cave beneath the rock, saying, "Your hunger shall now become thirst. As you once devoured land belonging to me, now you shall drink the tide thrice a day. Swallow it and spit it forth again, and your name will be a curse to sailors forever." So it was. Thrice a day she burned with a terrible thirst and stuck her head out of the cave and drank down the sea, shrinking the waters to a shallow stream, and then spat the water out again in a tremendous torrent, making a whirlpool near her rock in which no ship could live. This was Charybdis, one of the monsters. As for the other one, Scylla, who lived under the right-handed rock, she too had once been a beautiful naiad. Poseidon himself spied her swimming one day and fell in love with her, and so provoked the jealousy of his wife Andromeda that she cried out, "I will make her the most hideous female that man or god ever fled from." Probably never heard of Medusa. Thereupon she changed Scylla into something that looked like a huge fleshy spider with 12 legs and 6 heads. She also implanted in her an insatiable hunger, a wild greed for human flesh. Another cannibal. When any ship came within reach of her long tentacles, she would sweep the deck of its sailors and eat them. Ulysses stood in the bow as the ship nosed slowly up the strait. The roaring of the waters grew louder and louder, and now he saw wild feathers of spume flying as Charybdis sucked down the tide and spat it back. He looked at the other rock. Scylla was not in sight, but he knew she was lurking underneath, ready to spring. He squinted, trying to measure the distances. The only chance to come through unharmed, Ulysses saw, was to stay to the middle way between the 2 rocks, just beyond the suction of the whirlpool and just out of Scylla's reach. But to do this, that meant the ship must not be allowed to swerve a foot from its exact course, for the middle way was no wider than the ship itself was. He took the helm and bade his men keep a perfect regular stroke. Then, considering further, he turned the helm over to Eurylochus and put on his armor. Grasping sword and spear, he posted himself at the starboard rail. "Because," he said to himself, "there's no contending with the whirlpool. If we veer off our course, it must be toward the other monster. I can fight any enemy that I can see." The men rowed very carefully, very skillfully. Eurylochus chanted the stroke, and the black ship cut through the waters of the strait, keeping exactly to the middle way. They were passing between the rocks now. They watched in amazement as the water fell away to their left, showing a shuddering flash of seabed and gasping fish, and then roared back again with such force that the water was beaten into a white froth. They felt their ships tremble. "Well done," said Ulysses. "A few more strokes and we are to the middle. Keep the way. Stay in the middle way." But when measuring distance, Ulysses had not been able to reckon upon one thing. The ship was being rowed, and the great sweep of oars projected far beyond the width of the hull. Scylla, lurking underwater, seized 2 of those oars and dragged the ship towards her. Dumbfounded, Ulysses saw the polished shafts of the oars, which had been dipping and flashing so regularly, suddenly snap like twigs, and before he knew what was happening, the deck tilted violently. He was thrown against the rail and almost fell overboard. He lay on the deck, scrambling for his sword. He saw tentacles arching over him. They were like the arms of an octopus, but ending in enormous human hands. He found his sword, rose to his knees, and hacked at the tentacles, but too late. The hands had grasped 6 sailors, snatched them screaming through the air and into the sea. Ulysses had no time for fear. He had to do a number of things immediately. He roared to the crew to keep the ship on course, lest it be swept into the whirlpool. Then he seized an oar himself and rowed on the starboard side where the oars had been broken. From where he sat, he could see Scylla's rock, could see her squatting at the door of her cave. He saw her plainly, stuffing the men into her 6 bloody mouths. He heard the shrieks of the men as they felt themselves being eaten alive. He did not have time to weep, for he had to keep his crew rowing and tell the helmsman how to steer past the whirlpool. They passed through the strait into the open water. Full ahead lay Thrinacia with its wooded hills, its long white beaches, and the Isle of the Sun Titan, which would be their next landfall. So, next chapter is called The Cattle of the Sun, and we'll look at that tomorrow. Okay, so again, for tomorrow, if you would read the first part of the myth about Theseus, pages 145 to 155, a little longer than usual, and take the quiz on Theseus, the first quiz, and we will discuss it and then have another section of the adventures of Ulysses. So, thank you for watching today, and we'll see you again tomorrow.